Good morning, everyone. This is June 22nd, and we are again with our dynamic dialogue that we do the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. So this is the fourth Tuesday. June has a fifth Tuesday, so it'll be a couple more weeks before our next one. But I think given the summer slowdown that people experience, that will be just fine. So today we're going to talk about blockchain technology. And blockchain technology can be pretty comprehensive. So I'm going to give you just kind of an overview of what it is and how it applies to supply chains. So this is our dynamic dialogue, again, second and fourth Tuesday of the month. We do a short presentation, take questions, comments. This link is good for April through June, and so you're going to get a new link in July. Those of you who have subscribed will get an updated link, and as normal practice for me, I send out every Tuesday that we have a webinar, the link for the day. So if you don't have it in your calendar, you can just look for the email the day of that gives you the title of the talk and the link for that day's webinar. So blockchain. Blockchain has kind of several definitions, and it can be long and drawn out. And this one is a little bit long and drawn out. But blockchain is a shared immutable ledger, and we'll talk about that immutable ledger a lot more today. But it is a shared record keeping system of a lot of different transactions. Blockchain facilitates the process of recording transactions and tracking assets in a business network. So that's kind of a fancy way of saying that it is just a powerful tracking tool, and it's used to track assets, and assets can be tangible like a house, a car, cash, land, or it can be intangible. It can be things like intellectual property, patents, copyrights. So you can see that this is a system that handles all of these assets and more. So it's very powerful in what it can do. Virtually anything of value, they say, can be tracked and traded on a blockchain network. And using blockchain reduces risks and costs, cuts cost for all involved. So that's very important today, because now more than ever, we're a very risk-aware society. We're not very risk-averse in some cases, but we're more risk-aware, I believe, than we have been before, especially prior to the pandemic. But we still are looking to cut costs and improve our productivity, and blockchain is a good tool to do that. Here's 13 applications that I found that companies are using today. So there's a lot of companies that are using blockchain in a variety of ways, including sharing medical data, NFT marketplaces. I don't know about most of you, but I'm just still trying to figure out what the NFTs are and how they work. Music royalties, which is an interesting application. Then I highlighted 3 of these: cross-border payments, real-time Internet of Things operating systems, and supply chain and logistics monitoring. These are the ones that typically that we look at from the supply chain perspective. But again, there's more applications: personal identity security, and it also helps with security for companies, and we'll talk about that a little bit. They use it now for anti-money laundering tracking systems. The government is one of the big uses of blockchain technology, trying to get the applications of that and lots of things that they can do to make sure the bad guys aren't doing the bad stuff. A voting mechanism, that not necessarily the voting as we talk about in the news all the time, but it could be that. But any other type of voting that you do through surveys or through looking for local boards or big companies voting for boards of directors and initiatives and things like that for public and private companies. Advertising insights, original content, because again, it protects patents and trademarks and things like that. Cryptocurrency, which is a big application. You'll see in some cases that they talk about the blockchain a lot. in conjunction with cryptocurrency. They are not the same. They are different technologies. Cryptocurrency benefits, however, from blockchain technologies because it is secure and it has a very good transparency and tracking mechanism. And they're starting to use it too for real estate processing. So there's a lot of different applications, but we're going to focus on those three in bold today. We're going to talk about things that could apply to cross-border payments, so companies paying each other internationally, real-time Internet of Things operating systems. So we know about operating systems in the supply chain world, and Internet of Things is something that is another technology that's pretty prevalent and coming up and being touted more and more as a very valuable tool. And then overall supply chain and logistics monitoring, management and monitoring. So here's a picture of that shows you kind of the properties of this distributed ledger technology. And we'll look at that again in a little more detail. But you can see that at the heart is this hub where all of these things go into. Programmable, secure, anonymous, unanimous, time stamping is there, immutable, which again we'll talk about, and distributed networks. So this is part of how we define blockchain. I thought this was a really interesting visual. So blockchain is a database where they have records, any single record, and it gets bundled together with lots of others. And then it gets put on the chain that links all of these together. So you see the block, the individual block, and then you see that in the grid in the whole bundle of records. And if you imagine that this is under a microscope and you're looking at these things that are very, very tiny. And then this chain is this whole network of different types of bundles of records that all can interface. So it's very powerful. It's really important for a couple of reasons, because businesses run on information. Businesses don't run on data, they run on information. And you need to get that information to the right people as quickly as possible. And also, one of the things companies have struggled with for years is the interpretation of data, the source of the data. So with blockchain, everyone is seeing the same thing. So that really helps eliminate a lot of problems and a lot of risk. And as we all know, the faster you can get the data and the more accurate it is, the better it is for everybody that's using it, that's relying on it, that's interweaving that information into their decisions and into their business planning. So it's really ideal for delivering information because the information that you get through blockchain is immediate, it's shared, and it's completely transparent. Transparent means you can see everything, every transaction that's been associated with that data. So it's very, very important that companies can see all of that. It's stored on this, again, we're calling it an immutable ledger. So all of the tracking is there, one step to another, and the definition of immutable we'll get to in just a second. But it's on this ledger, if you will. If you think back to the old time, or maybe when you learned about accounting or whatever, if you didn't learn on a computer, you maybe had some, when you learned to write checks and to balance your checkbook and you had to record everything, that was a ledger. So it's this record holder of all of this information. And one of the really important things is with blockchain, only people and only organizations with certain permission can access that network. So you have to have very strict rules around it, and you have to be cleared by the rest of the network. So any one person in the network knows exactly how many other people and which other people have access to the network. So this is not something that is really an anonymous kind of thing where you go in and you don't know who's doing what and you don't know who can see the transactions you're making. It's all permissive. It's all done by permission and permissioned access. So it's very, very secure in that way. Because members are looking at this all together, you can see the transactions from end to end. Because you can see everything that was done, you've got confidence in the information that you're taking out of the blockchain network. And you really get a lot of efficiencies and opportunities because not everyone has to do the same thing over and over. You all have access to any of the data that's been turned into information, and you all have access from that end to end. So it's very efficient and opens up a wide range of opportunities for companies who can get that data now much more quickly, much more accurately, and much more cleanly. Blockchain also can track orders. It can track the payments, your accounts, your production, and a lot more. So it can really hold just about anything that you can put into a network. Here's some of the key elements. This distributed ledger technology. So this ledger is accessible by everybody in the network. Immutable records of transactions. Immutable means that you can't change those, that once they're there, they don't get changed. Now, that doesn't mean that if you make a mistake, you can't correct it. But if you correct it, you don't erase it. You put in an alternate step. So if you add something in, if you add 10 units in and you made a mistake, then you have to take those 10 units out and then put back the number that's correct. So for instance, if you want to put in 100 units and you put in 10 and that 10 is correct, you don't just add another 90 to that transaction. You have to actually remove the transaction that says you added 10 to get you back to baseline, and then you add in the 100 that you intended to add in the first place. So this isn't something that you can clean up by just augmenting the error you made or changing it around a little bit. You have to really take out what you put in, and there's a record of that. So every time somebody makes a mistake like that, then that is visible to all, and that's not for blaming purposes, and that's not for seeing who is making errors. It's really about making sure that everything is transparent, because if you wanted to add 100 pieces to inventory and you added 10 and then you added 90, if you're looking at that 2 months later, you might say, why in the heck did we add 10 and then add 90? I thought we always ordered those in quantities of 100. Is the supplier sending us partial orders? Did we do something different or whatever? So in the blockchain system, you would see that you added the 10 and then there would be a note saying that this was added in error, and then you would see that removed, and then you'd see the 100 pieces put in. So you can see all of that, and that's what that immutable means. It doesn't mean that you can't make a correction, but it means that you can't change things that would create a blind spot for anyone in the network. So anything that's done has to be completely transparent. And transactions are recorded once. So oftentimes you have to have a duplication of effort, or you have multiple organizations or multiple functions working with data, and they're duplicating the same thing. You don't have that with blockchain. The transaction is done once, and that makes it significantly different from typical and more traditional business networks, which may cause that extra work. So you've got all of these people involved in the blockchain, and to record on this cloud-based ledger. So again, immutable, these key elements, this immutable records, no participant can change or tamper with the transaction after it's been recorded to the shared ledger. If the transaction includes an error, the new transaction has to be added to reverse the error, and both transactions are then visible. So again, that's one of the key things. You've got this record-keeping ledger, and then you have these immutable records. Then we have what we call smart contracts. These smart contracts are designed to be really a set of rules, and it's called smart because it is designed to help you make decisions and to guide your decisions. So these smart contracts are stored on the blockchain, and they're executed automatically. They can define conditions for like transfers of funds, of bonds, of different things. They can be including things like travel insurance that has to be paid. It can be all kinds of things that are done automatically so that you don't have to think about it. You don't have to worry about it. It just happens because you put those rules in there. And everyone on the network agrees to those rules and understands what they are. So there's no surprises because everyone in the network is working on the same premises under the same contract requirements. So why is this important now? And why do we hear more about blockchain than ever before? We've been hearing about it for the last couple of years, but it seems like now there's a lot more information about it. I see more articles. I see more webinars about it. And some of the drivers for change are really about the wasted efforts when you duplicate records and you have third-party validations. So third-party validations can be helpful, but they cost money. If you need an external or a third party to validate something, then you don't have confidence in what you're doing. So if you have confidence in what you're doing and what everyone in the network is doing, then you don't have to have these third-party validations. When you have record-keeping systems that are vulnerable to fraud and cyber attacks, everyone worries and everyone looks to have certain protocols in place to keep you from that fraud and keep those cyber attacks away from you and from your business. With blockchain, you don't really have to have that because they are so insulated and they're so protected. With Internet of Things, transactions really have exploded. More and more companies are doing more and more transactions all the time. And the more you have, the more it can slow down your business and it can really drain the bottom line. So blockchain protects that, pulls all this together and really helps companies do business more end-to-end seamlessly. So the way it works, I say this every time I talk about blockchain. It's actually a pretty simple concept that really is a complex network. Each transaction gets recorded as a block of data. So they show these movement of assets, either something tangible like a product, or maybe intangible like an intellectual property or your trademark or your drawing for a certain part that you're making or that your supplier is making for you. The data block records all the information that you designate important. So you get all of the who, what, when, where, why, and how kind of things. You get the information about who recorded it, what actually happened, what was the transaction, where did it happen, or did it go from point A to point B? So both points would be documented. The timing, so that everyone can track that. You can put notes in to talk about why you did things. And then the how part of that really is how you're doing it through the system. So the blockchain takes this initial data, any kind of record, and it goes down to very simple records like an inventory transaction. So you might have that inventory transaction and it captures everything about that. The part number, the part master information, maybe the supplier, if it's an incoming thing, if it's going to a customer, it will capture which customer it's going to, the quantity, the size, all of the things relevant to the product. Also, what the transportation method is, what the transportation cost is, what the transportation standard time is. It's like a 3-day delivery. And then it will actually be able to overlay the actual things that happen on that. So when did it actually get picked up? When did it actually get delivered? When did you actually get paid for that if that was something you were shipping to your customer? When did you get the invoice out? When did the customer actually pay you? So all of these things are linked together. So each block is connected to the blocks before and after that. So that's why they call it this blockchain, because the block of data is connected to everything that happens to it before and after. This is even if ownership changes in the example of incoming material from your supplier or finished goods shipping to your customer, it gives you exact time sequence and of transactions and who was involved and what organizations. And it blocks every link securely to prevent that block from being altered or the chain being broken. So for example, if you have a inventory transaction that you're making, it's connected to where it came from and where it's going, and you can't break that link. You can, if you have an error, you can actually document the error, but you can't change those links. So everything is linked together securely so that chain does not get broken. And you can always trace it back to see where it started. So the blocks in these chains, they strengthen each other and they make sure the entire chain is really, really powerful. The tamper resistant chain and making the links make everything immutable. You can't change it. It's locked, it's linked. Once that transaction is entered and approved, now it has to be approved, but once that is approved, then you can't change it. You can make a modification to that, which is another transaction, but you can't change that transaction that you made. So you can't tamper with things because there's no possibility to do that. Once the transaction is made, it's made. And you have this whole network of transactions that everyone in the network can trust because they can see it again from end to end. So some of the benefits of blockchain, it's really about building trust. Because it's a members only network, the trust is created among the other network members who all have your permission to access all of that information. Everyone on the network has to be able to approve the access of everyone else in the network to have access to that data. So there's no hidden things. Everything is completely transparent. And because everything is time-stamped, the data is timely and it's accurate because it can't be changed. Once it's validated, it can, like I say, it's entered and validated. So that validation step becomes kind of important, but it just says check your work like you're supposed to do. Don't type too fast and hit enter, which I'm guilty of more often than I care to admit. But the data is timely and it increases accuracy. And the confidentiality is preserved because no one can access that is not approved to be in the access. So you get in that network, you get greater security because you have a consensus from all the network members. These validated transactions, again, they're immutable, and no one can delete any transactions. So I don't care who you are in the network, you cannot delete transactions. You can make additional transactions, but you cannot delete and go back. So that's an important thing to create this trust and build security. And then it's more efficient because you don't have to have reconciliations. You don't have to say, these are the invoices I show paid, and these are the ones I show open. Mr. Customer or Mr. Supplier, tell me which ones you have. You can see that information right there for everyone. Everyone can see that same information. And it makes things a lot cleaner, and you're not comparing, you're not trying to look for errors in things. You all see the same data. And then you have these smart contract rules. And these rules help you because they execute things automatically, and they are really integrated into the blockchain to make these rules make everything more efficient and do things automatically, like pay invoices. You can set this up so that your invoices, maybe you have net 30 terms. So when the invoice is received, you can have a rule that says it needs to be paid by day, say 28 in the system. And if it's not, then on day 28, it will automatically pay that. So you can do all kinds of things with these smart contract rules. So what I know for sure is there's really a better way to manage your supply chain, and blockchain is a key tool for the future. Again, it's both simple and complex. 3 simple elements: a record, a ledger or a group of records, and these smart contract rules that tell you how to do that, all linked into this chain of a network. And it's a single record, this bundle of records, and the chain that links all of that together And as you saw in one of those early slides, there are so many different applications today. It's really crazy what's going on with that. And a lot of the articles I'm reading are talking about blockchain and Bitcoin, or and another type of currency in the same language. They're not the same thing, but they are very closely linked, and one enables the other significantly. The other thing, again, that we have a very volatile environment. If you've seen some of my other webinars, I talk about VUCA: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That is our environment today. So security is a key factor for every business that's in operation today. So these immutable ledgers with clear traceability, they make everyone feel more comfortable. Everything is in a closed network, so people that can't get in there can't get in there. If you don't have access to the network, you can't go in and see. And then you have the verification process that's within that network. So you authenticate the transactions, and then it's confirmed by partners. For example, if you ship to your customer and you ship 10 units and your customer only receives 9, then your customer is going to say, hey, I only got 9 of these. I shipped 10 and that was confirmed by the logistics company, but only 9, or maybe only 9 good ones arrived. So you can see where the gaps are, then you can identify what happened and who the responsible party is to go close that gap. So the security there is very, very important and a huge benefit. You can see some of the areas that are already adopting lots of blockchain technologies. The government, they want to be able to track a lot of different things. They're tracking things like money laundering. They're tracking, again, a lot of nefarious types of actions, but they're also tracking payments between government entities and between government and their suppliers, or government and even employees, but mostly the contractors and the workers with the government, and then government agency to government agency. The cybersecurity, this is a big application. So when you are trying to secure the network, you can use blockchain to actually secure the network. You want that blockchain network to be secure, but it can also be used to make sure that that network is secure by limiting the access to anyone who's not in your approved network. It will shut it down. It will shut down all the ports and all of the access to that data until that person is found, or that breach is fixed. The banking industry is loving the blockchain because of the same kinds of reasons, because you can clearly see where funds have been moved and when and how much and by what authorization. Healthcare, again, is a big one, especially with the pandemic and trying to trace things like vaccine records, look at when the first shot was given, when the second shot was given, what treatments were given when patients are having to be relocated from one place to another. The long-term COVID that we've seen, the healthcare is a good tracker for that. And it's a good tracker for any other kind of information or disease that you might have. Things like diabetes, things like chronic heart issues. Anytime you've had something in the past, and this is great going forward. I know for me, we don't have records on measles and mumps and all of those kinds of things for myself or my siblings. We pretty much remember, oh yeah, we had this or we had that, but my parents are no longer gone. And my mother was the keeper of that information. So after she died about 5 years ago, there's no source of information there. We're kind of subject to whatever we have, or whatever we might remember, whatever innocuous record we could find somewhere. But today, going forward, healthcare records are going to be much more documented, much more detailed. So you won't have to say, did I ever have the mumps? You'll be able to say, oh, I didn't. I had this shot at this point in time. And these things are going to become more and more important for us as individuals and us as society. And you're seeing companies pick up these technologies. Walmart is a very early adopter of blockchain, and that you can imagine with all the transactions that Walmart has. I'm thinking about where some of their parts start, where their products are made all over the world, and then they're shipped into distribution centers. From distribution centers, shipped to individual stores. From individual stores, they're bought and they go into different customers' homes. They can track so much of that down to who's buying it, unless you're using a cash transaction. And many people use debit cards, they use credit cards, they write checks. So if there's any kind of thing like that, other than just handing over pure cash, and oftentimes even with cash, if you have a card, they ask you to log that in so that they can track what you bought, when you bought, where you bought it. So that's a very powerful thing. It's a little bit scary on some of the aspects of that, but it's also very powerful and helps businesses do better. So that's Dynamic Dialog for today. Kind of short and sweet overview on blockchain technologies. In 3 weeks, because we have an extra Tuesday in the month of June, on July 13th, which is the second Tuesday of July, I'm going to be talking about supply chain productivity. 2 weeks after that, I'm going to talk about lean supply chains, and that will go into some of the things that I have planned for the fall. For August, I really don't have my topics outlined yet. So if you have any suggestions, I'm open to receiving those. You can go to jane@purple-link.net and send me ideas and thoughts of topics you would like. Let's see what we have next. If you're interested in further discussion, you can always do the callwithjane.com. It's http //callwithjane.com, and that takes you right to my calendar, and you can set up time to talk to me. We have the CPSM class number 3. That's going to be in the fall. It's starting in September. So anybody that signs up should be finished in early December, and you can take the exam within a couple weeks, and you'll be finished with that one by the end of the year. So that's a good time to start. Risk-based thinking and decision-making. I'm doing a workshop that's about a 4.5-hour workshop, 1.5 hours a week for 3 weeks, starting in September on the 9th. And then Lean and Six Sigma. And these are going to be during the day. These are going to be 11:30 to 1. That's my plan right now. Lean and Six Sigma. So if you'd like to know how your company can start some Lean and Six Sigma programs, that starts October 21st. And again, it's the same format, 1.5 hours a week for 3 weeks. So I'm going to leave you with this. Blockchain provides supply chain capabilities that were not possible in the recent past. That's from Dave Waters, and it comes from Supply Chain Today. Dave is a director at Steris, which is a leading provider of infection prevention and other procedural products and services focused primarily on healthcare. He has a broad background in supply chain, and he feels that these are capabilities we haven't had. So the way companies are going to be adopting these is going to be really across the board. So look for that going forward. Let me check the chats and the comments. Here's a chat in a webinar provided by IBM, they expanded on the concept of the distributed ledger, explaining that the ledger is copied from the server to all the participants. There's an algorithm that if a record gets out of sync with the rest of the copies of the ledger, it gets auto-corrected. So I've seen that, and I've also seen that it is not a copy feature, that it's actually just one set of master data that everyone has access to. So that's interesting to see that this one says that it's copied. And he goes further to say that that makes hacking close to impossible, because if the database is accessed improperly, and modified, and it can't really be modified in the past, you can only add to it. It's going to get corrected before the hacking has a chance to modify copies and do things. So it's a very powerful technology. Companies need a little bit of investment to get into it, but you're going to see that, I think, become more open and more easily accessible by more and more companies over time. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording, and I'll be happy to take questions or other comments. Thanks for those comments.